necessarily need to see that, but whatever. Starting the podcast. 3, 2, 1. Hey, what's up, everyone? How you doing? Welcome to the Skulls and Knives podcast for the Fuck You Dad segment. Introducing my dad, Jason Robinson.
Fuck you, son.
So real quick, just wanted to let you guys know about a sticker giveaway. We're doing it slightly different this time. If you share the page, us, a video, anything from us, and tag us in it, so tag at Skulls and Knives Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, we will see that. We'll put your name into a poll or a pool, I should say, and then we will randomly select one on the next pod to get a free sticker. Remember to like, rate, share, and subscribe to everything. So, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay.
Good.
I'm a little tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
It's
got
been a long week.
Yeah.
And you tied one on last night.
What's that?
You tied one on last night.
What's that mean?
That means you got drunk.
Oh yes, I did. I don't know what words mean sometimes.
So.
Yeah, we went and we hung out with some friends. It was pretty fun.
Cool.
Yeah. How were the kids?
They were good. We got a little life hack going to get Oliver to sleep.
Oh yeah, the disco ball.
Yeah. So apparently Oliver sleeps with some kind of a ceiling thing and lights on the ceiling or whatever. And so I heard Hannah talk about that. So my other son, Ty, has a disco light ball kind of thing. So we put it in the room and Oliver went straight to sleep.
Straight out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to get him back to bed this morning.
Yeah.
At like 6 o'clock when he woke up with that, and he was just ready to rave.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I was telling Hannah that we should get one of those. I think it'd be fun. But again, he also sleeps with the one he has.
Yeah.
But who knows, you might have ruined him. He might be like, "This doesn't move. What the hell is this?"
My lights move. JJ's lights move.
Yeah, and the other problem was Everly had gone in our room too.
Yeah.
So she was just like, "Whoa, this is cool." I'm like, "Shh, go to sleep. I'm tired." But it's so cool, Dad. But yeah, it was good to see my old friends and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us a little about you? Like, what do you do? What's your, like, no one knows anything about you.
No one knows anything about me.
I mean, maybe the 4 people that do listen regularly probably already know exactly who you are, given you are one of
your number one supporter, right? No, so excuse me. So, I guess I'll start where I am, what I do now. You know, I'm project sponsor is my title at a construction company. And I oversee one of our work groups. We build water and wastewater treatment facilities. And so I spend most of my time making sure that project managers and project engineers and our project teams have everything they need and have the strategies put together to go build stuff, and basically overseeing the group and coming up with strategic plans for the future, chasing after new work, maintaining and developing relationships with engineers and owners and that kind of thing. So I spend a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, and it's been a lot of fun. Last year and a half or so I've been doing that, but it's definitely a challenge. Before that, I was a project manager, building the same type of work, water and wastewater treatment stuff, and did that for 15 plus years. And then part of that, before that, I was a part-time youth pastor, music pastor, college pastor. So I spent a lot of time in ministry. Spent a lot of years while I was still doing construction. I was also doing ministry part-time. And so I spent a lot of years hoping that was going to turn into a full-time gig, and really driving and pushing to, be the best youth pastor I can be, to be the best college pastor, to create the best atmosphere for ministry to happen, and eventually realized that path wasn't getting me where I needed to be or wanted to be. And so that's when I changed my focus a little bit away from kind of doing two things, being part-time this and part-time that, and really just focused on my career in the construction industry. And that's kind of also when it took off. And it's amazing what happens, I guess, when you focus your efforts. So
cool. So what do you go to church now at all, or no?
We were in like I said, we were in ministry for a long time. It's probably about 2016ish, and 2015, 2016, I really realized that being in ministry was not healthy for me. It was actually I don't know what the right word is, causing me a lot of anxiety and stress, and a lot of spiritual hurt, a lot of emotional hurt. And so I decided to step out of ministry and just be a church member for a while and see what happens, And so then for about a year, we just went to church, showed up on Sunday mornings. So we went to a small group, but never, never got involved in any kind of actual ministry for that year or so. And then eventually, we just got disenchanted with church as a whole, with the, I think there was a lot of, this is right around the time of the election, 2016. There was a lot of, on one hand, on Sunday morning, we're saying that we love Jesus and we want to be people who love others and follow the teachings of Jesus. And then on the other hand, those same people are being very hateful towards others. They're being, bigoted, and I don't want to necessarily call anybody racist, but definitely anti-immigrant. And it was a real difficult time for me, as I was wrestling a lot, and I would say to a certain extent I'm still wrestling with how those things all jive together. And maybe that's part of the deal, is we just got to wrestle, and we continue to wrestle for a long time, and then forever maybe, and that tension is what kind of keeps us in a good spot. But I still haven't found a really good resolution to how you can be two ways. On one hand, saying that you follow a religion that is based on love and hope and peace and kindness, and then on the other hand, being very not any of those things.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of where we're at. That's a long answer to a simple question. Do we go to church now? The answer is no.
So would you call yourself a Christian still, or have you been looking at other I'm just curious where you are philosophically right now.
I guess I don't know what I would call myself. I kind of think of myself as sort of post-Christian.
What's that?
Well, meaning I was a Christian, but I'm not anymore. but it's interesting because on one hand, there's a theology that basically says that once you are saved or born again, once you come to know Jesus as your Savior, you're always saved. So you'll hear that term sometimes in church, once saved, always saved. And then,
which is great for me.
Well, the thing is, right, there'll be other people that say that you can also say that the Bible says that you will know them by their fruits, right? So you'll see the fruits of their life, and you'll know what their whether or not they are truly, quote unquote, saved. So it's kind of a weird thing to say you're not a Christian anymore, because if you ever were truly a Christian, then you're always a Christian in that theology. But on the flip side, somebody would argue that if you're not a Christian anymore, then maybe you really never were. So it's kind of a weird thing. But like I said, I like to think of myself as post-Christian and maybe a recovering Christian, in the sense that I long for a philosophy religion, theology, if you will, that is consistent and universal and takes into account the teachings of all of the great philosophers and prophets of the world, and understands that maybe each religion, each group of people are all trying to understand the universe, understand quote unquote God, that we're trying to understand our existence and in a different way. And we've all kind of come to some understanding of it, whether it be a Native American understanding of it, and each tribe having a slightly different version of that, or whether it be a Judeo-Christian version of that, or whether it be a Hindu or Buddhist take on that. I think what I would like to be able to say is that I am humble enough to recognize that as a human being, if I believe that there is a power that is great enough, strong enough, powerful enough to create the entire universe, and with that, knowing the immensity of that universe, that I would be humble enough to say, I don't know that any of us are all going to have it all figured out. And so how can we somehow say there's some universal truths about loving each other, about being kind to each other, about helping each other out, those kinds of things that we embrace, and the rest of it's all superfluous stuff that kind of bounces around the outside. And we can argue about, even in Christian circles, right? And even within, if you want to just talk about a denomination, right? Even within the Baptists or the Lutherans, there's all these different sects of those people or of those groups. And so they have their own arguments within their own narrow philosophy, or their own narrow band of the spectrum, if you will. And I feel like if we can, what's the unifying thing? What's the thing that ties all these things together, whether it be Buddhism or Hinduism or Taoism, take your pick, right? Christianity, Islam. There are certain truths that are connected through there, certain teachings that are connected through there. And so if you can take those and, push aside all the arguments about the semantics, I think you find a more, and I guess you could call it a universalist kind of view, where you understand that faith, hope, love, truth, kindness, peace, joy, those are the things that you really want to bring out in each other. So, and actually the Bible talks about those things being fruits of the Spirit, right? So the fruits of the Spirit in the Bible are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. None of those fruits include righteousness, self-righteousness, judgment, etc. So if the fruits of the Spirit are those things, then maybe those are the fruits of the Spirit of all humankind, right?
Yeah, which tends to be true across the board of most religions when you look at them. Like basically the core is like, don't be a dick.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Be good to those around you. And like that's kind of how I've taken my views on philosophy recently. Definitely reading more into like Buddhism and Taoism, Confucianism, a lot those Eastern philosophies really speak to me for some reason, just because they're, and by Buddhism I mean like the old Buddhism, not, I'm blanking on what it's called exactly, but not any of the new schools where there's like, where now there's all these hells and now there's all these things, and like it's a religion that is slowly, well, it's almost like it's a philosopher that slowly turned into a religion.
Yeah.
Where it was, so like Buddha, if all the evidence, if he really was a true person, but even the original text accredited to the original Buddha, he talks a lot about demons and gods, because Buddhism was technically a philosophy out of Hinduism. And it was completely different, looking into yourself to battle these things, but he still used all the same terminology that was used during the day. I mean, Buddha was a theist. So if you look at his original teachings,
Right.
And that got twisted and turned into, rather than just being, so let's say a philosopher that happens to be a Christian would, maybe his philosophies are good and like more universal, but the way he uses to describe it, so like maybe an internal struggle he would use as a demon, like stuff like that.
Right.
You see that a lot in his original teachings, but if you take all the dogma away, it's a really straightforward, like, look inside yourself, deal with it, be kind to others. Like you said, basically everything that's the core values of most religions is that love for other people and yourself, and trying to be selfless yet aware of self.
Right.
And like, I mean, Buddhism definitely focuses more and mostly about being aware of yourself, but as a way to channel all that love for other people.
Right.
So you're trying to, it's like, hey, take care of yourself, make yourself a good person, then spread it.
Right.
And so at least that's my theology behind it. But I also would consider, because I'm looking more at Buddhist philosophy and not as a religion, I like to call myself a secular Buddhist. So I don't necessarily believe that there is a God as in the God of the Bible or Islam or Judaism, a God as in a omniscient sentient being that is controlling something or actually creating the world. That just seems improbable. Given, to me at least currently, it seems improbable that there's actually like a being doing everything.
Right.
But what seems more probable to me is that this thing that the ancient philosophers called God, and was more as in nature and the unknown, and like more as a like the unknown thing that connects us all, kind of deal. So, and that allows me to, when I think about it that way, to more easily become more universalist in that way. Is like, well, this is all human language for something that is not human.
Right.
And so we all come up with our own stories throughout different times and ages to explain things that are unexplainable. But I don't think any of us, when we're talking about the,
nobody can see you, by the way.
Oh, hello everyone. When you're talking, I was talking about the unknown. But yeah, so when you're talking about all the dogma around it,
right,
like you said, the dogma is all purely human created, and I think the core values are more universal and probably, I feel like, been around longer than we really think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back.
If you can't tell by the way I just described myself and he just described his things, he's much older than me and has way more knowledge in theology than I do, which is why I love having you on, by the way, and talking to you about this stuff, because you're way more knowledgeable about it than I am.
Well, thanks. And it's funny because it has been a little while since I was seriously studying a lot of philosophy and theology. But I have a general philosophy of life that kind of guides everything I think and do. And that that definitely plays into what I think about religion and other things. And so that philosophy is very simply that I'm a human, you're a human, there's no difference.
Yeah.
So that philosophy plays out in my marriage in the sense that if I'm a human and my wife is a human, Kim, shout out. uh, but if I'm a human and she's a human, then we're on equal standing, right? And both of our ideas and thoughts and desires are equal, have equal value. So whether, and in a very like almost childish example, her opinion about where we go on vacation is just as valid as mine, and vice versa. So we have a conversation about, well, where do you want to go? Well, here's what I want to do, and here's why. Well, here's what I want to do, and here's why. Okay, well, what if we do yours this year and mine next year? Okay, yeah. So we're trading off, we're compromising, we're coming to an agreement based on a mutual understanding that we're both equal in value and status, if you will. And what I think sometimes happens and not, and I would say it happens maybe more in philosophy than actuality. Like if you think about people's real life, a lot of times it doesn't play out the same way that the philosophy or the theology they would espouse. So there's this idea in the Judeo-Christian mind anyway, and I know in other religions as well, but that the man is the head of the household and the woman was made as a helper to him. And because of that, he has the ultimate final authority in all things, right? So, and from a philosophy standpoint, if you ask most Christians, they would say, yes, that's the prescribed way that the Bible operates. But if you ask their families how that plays out in real life, a lot of them would be like, yeah, grandma's in charge no matter what. Right? Yeah. Like we get it, or mom's the boss, dad's just along for the ride kind of thing. Because it doesn't play out in real life all the time in the same way that the philosophy or the theology gets brought forward. So from the very beginning, I always had an issue with the whole like husband is the one in charge, and if I've done a bunch of weddings in my role as a minister, and I almost always talk about that verse in a sense that there's an equal footing there. Like the challenge to the man and the woman is basically the same, to be there for each other, to lift each other up, to be their cheerleader, to encourage them, to challenge them and support them in chasing their dreams. It's never like, hey lady, you got to listen to this guy and he's in charge, because my underlying philosophy doesn't jive with that. So all that to say that because I have this idea that this philosophy that all humans are created equal, and by the way, it's part of the Constitution of the United States anyway, endowed by their creator, quote unquote, right? But if all men and women are equal in footing and status, and all of their opinions and thoughts and ideas have the same value, then it's difficult for me to say that 7,000, 8,000 years ago, even 4,000 years ago, that those people had a better idea or a better understanding of who God is than these people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if I think, hey, these people are equal to these people, then I have to say the two religions or the two philosophies that came out of that had the same value base. And so they're both just people trying to understand this crazy ass world we live in. And because of that, they both have equal value. And I have to look at them and say, okay, this one may have been, bastardized or whatever you want to call it more than this one. But that doesn't mean that their underlying philosophies don't have the same value. And that I feel like it's not a little bit, I feel like it's a lot arrogant for anybody, whether it be Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, anybody, to say that we have found the only way. Oh, yeah. And the reason I think that is because that underlying philosophy is that we're all equal and we all have equal value. And if you're a Christian, or you've been brought up in a Judeo-Christian mindset, the Bible speaks to that. the value of each individual person.
Mhm.
You know, so anyway, it becomes a philosophy that makes it really hard to sit in a church and, you know, to hear being preached from the pulpit that this is the only way, the only way, the only way.
Mhm.
Because in my mindset, there are many ways, you know,
Yeah.
to understanding God.
Yeah.
And this may be the way that you found that works for you,
Mhm.
but other people found a different way.
Yeah, there's that's one of the things I like a lot about Buddhism too, is that and I would say New Age Catholicism is it's very much like this is our philosophy, but like not saying anything else is wrong.
Right.
Like, you know, everyone, it's that universalist mindset of like everyone's like kind of right. This is just our philosophy.
Yeah.
So I forget the name of the podcast, but I listened to this podcast by this Buddhist monk in Los Angeles. He plays the harmonica before every episode, which is kind of funny. But they're all just his lectures. And a lot of the Catholic schools and Catholic churches in Los Angeles are like, come on in, bring us your philosophy. And instead of hearing like, I don't know exactly how mass works, but you know, instead of hearing a teaching from the bishop or whatever, you're hearing he goes up and talks instead. And it's pretty interesting because then he'll have teachings from like priests. That's the word I was looking for. He'll have teachings from priests too that come to the monastery and talk on during their service too about Catholicism. So it's pretty interesting how open those two religions have become, at least in America, become more universal. But how does that like philosophy you have of life like play out in politics? Because I know that you prescribe or call yourself a libertarian, but I know you're also not super strict on that. So I'm just curious.
Yeah. So again, you know, that philosophy plays out in the sense that, and this is part of why libertarianism is appealing to me. I mean, libertarianism basically says, do whatever you want, just don't hurt somebody else. Right. And there's more to it, but we're going to boil it down. I mean, someone's going to see this and want to argue about the other points of libertarianism, but and how it doesn't work or whatever. But I will say that the thing that's appealing to it is the idea that if we truly believe that all people have equal value and their opinions and thoughts are equal, then if somebody wants to smoke marijuana, or for that matter, shoot heroin, or for that matter, snort cocaine, who am I to care and to put my value judgment on what they think is valuable? As long as they're not hurting someone or damaging someone's property or doing something to infringe on the rights of other people, why do I care?
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that say, like, we have to protect each other or society from these things, and people get sucked in, the gateway drug and all that. But and I think there's a certain value to that thought. We have to say some way we have to go, okay, at what point do we step in and help somebody? You know what I mean? But the flip side is, if they don't want to be helped, why do I care? You know, and not that I don't care about them as a person. I care enough about their rights as a human being to not infringe upon them by putting my moral values on them. So if you're committing a violent crime, okay, well, guess what? We're going to stop you from committing a violent crime, or we're going to punish you for committing a violent crime because you've done something to harm someone else.
Yeah.
You rob a bank. You may not have harmed someone, but you've harmed someone's property. You've infringed upon someone's rights. Okay, so that's a crime. We're coming after you. We're going to prosecute you. You're in your own home, smoking weed, snorting coke, and you stay up for 6 days and you eat, Little Caesars pizzas, whatever. Who gives a shit? Like, really, like, who cares? You didn't hurt anybody. Now, if you're doing that and you're neglecting your children, or you're hurting your children, there's a different story. Now you're infringing upon their rights. And so now we have to step in as a society and say, you can't do that. But to just say that these things are illegal on a wholesale basis, I mean, that was the whole basis behind prohibition. Oh, alcohol makes you do all these horrible things, so let's just outlaw all the alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, what happened? There was an underground market for alcohol,
Mhm.
and now we go to bars that celebrate the underground speakeasy lifestyle because it's cool, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
And-
the bar I work at's entirely, all the cocktails are based off of Prohibition era cocktails.
So that whole thing is a problem for me. And so philosophically or politically, I am much more for, I am always on the side of rolling back laws, stepping back from a lot of the rules that we live by, that we've placed on society, because a lot of them are based on either somebody's financial gain, or they're based on somebody's political gain, or they're based on somebody's moral ideas that they want to impose on the rest of us. And so, but I will admit that also makes it difficult sometimes when talking about how far do you take that? You know, how far do you take the idea of libertarianism? And at what point do you say, no, we're going to stop? Like a good example is, you know, libertarianism typically is very anti foreign war, so anti-interventionist, right? Like we're not going to get involved in other people's wars. It's not our problem. We're not the policemen of the world. We don't need to be. We need to worry about our own roads and our own people and our own government and our own sewer systems, and stop worrying about everybody else. And if we did that, we'd have lower taxes and et cetera, et cetera. Well, so that plays out in other ways, considering there may be really horrible things happening in other countries. And can the collective morality of the American people sit back and say, we're not going to get involved in that, you know? And that's part of what led to the rise of Hitler, or at least what led to the United States not getting involved in World War II as early as we did, because we kind of said, hey, that's a European war. It's not an American war. We're going to focus on us. Of course, that allowed Hitler to do a lot of things that maybe he otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. It allowed Mussolini to do all that, and it allowed the Japanese Empire to grow like it did. And we didn't get involved until someone attacked us, right? And so, and you know, we may not have even declared war on Hitler if he hadn't declared war on us right after his ally Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So it's like, all right, now we're in it. So here we go. So a lot of times, you know, we think of it like we're the moral, you know, the policemen of the world and the moral upright people. But yeah, I don't know. It's a struggle, and it's like a lot of things in my life right now. It's like I haven't landed anywhere, and I'm always curious about how do people come to these, like, how do you land on such a solid place where you totally believe in one thing all the time? Because I am in constant struggle with that stuff. And along those lines, you know, it's like you know, a lot of conservatives will say on one hand that they want to keep as much money in their pocket as they can, so they really try hard not to pay the federal government more than they have to, and they'll hire CPAs to do that, which is fine. I do the same thing, right? And I would say probably Democrats do the same thing. But if you're a conservative and you believe that America needs to be involved in foreign wars, and America needs to have a huge military, and America needs to be, you know, doing all these things actively in the world, then you should in turn be like, well, shoot, let's pay more taxes because I want this bigger, stronger, faster, better military, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to go over there and straighten Kim Jong-un out, and we need to go over there and you know, straighten out the Russians and whatever. Like, take your pick, right? So the philosophy doesn't seem very cohesive or whatever. The same thing's true for the liberal side. You know, they'll say on one hand that they don't want anyone to control their body, you know, and make any anti-abortion law, but yet they want to control so many other things. And it's like you don't have a consistent philosophy, and that wrestle back and forth between, you know, what I understand as my philosophy, and kind of how we play that out in the world is part of my, I guess, angst or frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand how people are constantly just, I got it all figured out, So.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. Yeah, so I mean, I lean more on the socialist end of the spectrum, but in a lot of ways, like, I'm looking for the exact, very similar things. The freedoms that come with, so for instance, I feel like with socialism, I'm more involved with the socialist philosophy as far as healthcare goes, housing for poor people, especially, universal UBI, universal basic income,
Okay.
and a lot of these other programs that I feel are basically extensions of what we're kind of already doing. Okay. I will say the only one of those, any ideal from socialism that I will, like, die on a cross for, is universal healthcare, or at least a public option. Because, so for instance, Hannah and I just had to get healthcare for us. Luckily, our kids are covered by the state, because the state offers all children, or state of Oregon offers all children to have free healthcare. Thank God. But I make an okay income, and we're now spending an extra $150 on healthcare a month, which is a lot of money for us, given the fact that, for instance, we're celebrating the fact that we're going to spend $30 less on our rent this month, because we're like, oh, good, we have a little bit off our shoulders. Like, it's real tight. And so, especially being in that middle ground where I am right now, where I don't qualify for, we make too much to qualify for any government assistance,
right?
But we make too little to be fully comfortable,
right?
And so we're constantly in this, like, back and forth struggle, which I don't want to be in. But I feel like, especially with healthcare, it's like at least a public option that would be taken out of either your tax as an added tax every paycheck, or as a opt-in tax for your returns. I just feel like is a way easier system so for instance, Obamacare, it took us like 6 hours to figure out getting healthcare for the two of us on that website. And on top of that, if we don't get it, then we get fined even more money than we would have for getting it. Right. And so I hate Obamacare. I'll be honest with you. Not that it didn't take it too far, but because of this law where you have to have insurance. You're essentially helping these big insurance companies by being forced to buy it. And so, more people are insured because you're going to fine them twice as much as what they're going to get the insurance for, but they're still out tons of money. And so I feel like if you had a public option and you had enough people sign up for it, you would, which a lot of people would, and you do it on a percentage base of your income rather than, or a percentage rather than a set dollar amount per person. So for instance, someone that makes less than me or a little bit more than me is still going to pay that $150. Okay. So if you had something that was based on percentages, then someone that makes more than me would pay a little bit more into it, and then someone that makes less than me would have to pay less into it. Okay. Rather than what we have now, where it's like, hey, you can get the $50 a month plan. I can get the $50 a month plan, but your copay is $5,000, and they don't have any sets for anything. Your deductible is $5,000, and there's no set copays. So it's essentially like, in case a house falls on you, you will at least be taken care of. Right. But other than that, pay up, homeboy. Yeah. And so I just want to be done with that whole system. I think that system feels very ancient to me, and I really would like a system where that's much easier and taken care of, where I don't have to worry when my kids are 18 and like they're not going to have health insurance. What if they get in a car accident? What if they do this? Then it's all based on how much money you have, which sucks. And I hate that system. However, that is the only one I'm willing to be like, I'm going to take this all the way. The rest of them are totally workable, but I just feel like it goes back to that philosophy of like loving people. Like, I don't want anyone to get hurt. I want everyone to have the same possibilities as Bill Gates does. You know what I mean? As far as healthcare goes.
Yeah.
I want everyone to have the same opportunity that if they get sick, they don't have to immediately check their bank account and be like, do I have enough money to go in, or do I just try and ride this out and hope it's not bad?
Right.
Which I've basically done.
Yeah,
and so I want a solution, and I feel like making universal healthcare in my head is the best solution, because then everyone's paying into it and everyone's getting the same healthcare.
Right.
But I also see that that's really hard to get across a lot of Americans, especially conservatives. But if you talk about a public option like we have, I know the conservative I've talked to don't really like the post office either, but you already have the post office, you have the government paying for roads, you have the government paying for this. So why don't we just include healthcare into that in some way?
Right.
In a similar way, the post office is, you still have to buy stamps. You still have a copay.
Right.
But it's an insurance option done by the government, so that it's an easier way to go about it than it is to go through a normal insurance company.
Yeah. This is another one of those, like everything, where I don't have a good answer or a good philosophy, but I have a lot of questions or a lot of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, being from a more libertarian type mindset, I'm leery of big government.
Mm-hmm.
But healthcare is one of those things where I struggle, because I do feel like we have the resources in America to make sure that people have access to healthcare. I think the systems we have right now aren't great, and I think whether it be Medicare or Medicaid, any of those systems need to be revamped. And I've never had to use it, I don't think. Maybe when we were first married, I think the kids were on Access It for a little while, which is, assistance with like formula and stuff like that. And I've been really lucky to have jobs that have, good insurance and or decent insurance, even if it is a little pricey. And we've been pretty lucky health-wise not to have a lot of health issues. So, the problem, I guess, that I run into is like, and we talked about this, actually. This kind of ties in here, but if we had a flat tax rate, that may solve a lot of the problems that we seem to run into. Meaning,
and that's something I'm super with libertarians and conservatives on, is a flat tax.
Right. So meaning, if everybody had to pay, just pick a number, 10%.
Yeah.
Whether it's me or, to your point, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or anybody else, we're all paying the same percentage, and there's no loopholes and there's no way to get out of it. And, if you want to say that certain corporations, corporations have a different rate than people, and if you want to say that nonprofit organizations have no tax or a different rate than people, like I'm down for all those conversations. But if you think about it, that flat rate would ensure that everybody pays a certain percentage of their taxes, and that at least from my perspective, I think there's going to be more opportunity to have enough money to take care of all the things that you get taken care of, and that would include things like healthcare, for instance, and revamping the system. And I think, to his credit, Obama was trying to revamp the system, and I don't know that it did a great job, and I feel a little bit unprepared or uninformed to try to argue one way or the other. But I will say that
Don't worry, it's not like I'm ultra performant, ultra informed either.
No, but I will say that I think it's a good thing to try to make sure that people in America are healthy, and for the most part, have the ability to go to the doctor when they're sick and to avoid chronic, life-threatening diseases because they're getting taken care of when they're, at the beginning of the sickness rather than at the end. And,
exactly.
It goes back to sort of helping, the Good Samaritan, helping the person that everybody else turns away, and how can you do that? Well, I can be willing to take some of my tax money, instead of sending it to a foreign country to help them, I'm going to keep it here at home and revamp a system that's not great. The problem is, obviously, you have to have the willingness to do that. And I don't know that everybody, that Americans have the willingness to revamp these systems. It's just like immigration. You have to revamp it. You can't, it's not black, it's not white, it's not shut the doors, it's not open the doors, it's let's control the doors and let's figure out a better system to do that.
Yeah.
And those kind of things get shut down all the time,
Yeah, because for some reason the only things that we can seem to get past are as if it's a Republican majority or a Democratic majority that can agree on it and no one else can.
Right. And so much of that is sound bites.
Oh yeah.
We're digesting our news in memes and in 30-second sound bites or tweetable. And that's not a dig at the president, but that's true that, the tweetable piece. And if we don't get a full concept in, 140 characters, 280 or whatever it is now, then, but I posted an article and on Facebook just to kind of get some reaction. And I'm not sure that everybody who replied even read the article.
Yeah.
A lot of them probably did, but I'm not sure how many of them did. It seemed like some of them maybe didn't read all the article. I posted a second article and it was, I think I got some better responses. Like people maybe actually read that article a little more, but it's a knock on people. It's just kind of how we are these days. We take things in these little pieces and we form opinions based on a very small amount of information. And it's difficult to have a conversation like this because we just don't take the time to talk through it. We don't sit down and take the time to talk through politics with other people and see what their points of view are. And, we're so busy doing our own thing and, raising our own flag, whichever flag that might be, that, we're not having conversation and we're not discussing the nuances of politics and trying to really understand where other people are coming from and why they feel the way they do. That's a sad thing, I think.
Yeah.
So
I think so too. And that's kind of like, not only do I think we have good conversations, but that's kind of why I wanted to have a monthly segment with you, is because I know that we if you looked at it on paper, if we just wrote down what we believed on paper, you would think we hated each other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if we wrote down, okay, he's a socialist, he's a libertarian,
right?
He's a post-Christian, he's a secular Buddhist, blah, blah, blah. Like you'd be like, these people couldn't be more different. But one of the things I wanted to do is like have these conversations between people that are on two different sides of the aisles, but are also both willing to meet and talk and actually have conversations about things.
Yeah.
And actually find middle ground. Because I think a lot more people in this world are like that than we think.
Oh, absolutely.
And those people are typically quiet because you don't have a hard opinion on something that you're willing to die for. So you're not quote unquote die for, as you would say on Facebook. You know what I mean? So the only people you see are people who are just spitting the talking points of whatever side they're on, and everyone else is bombarded by that, and they don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. It's like, holy crap, you were all stupid. Like, can we just stop with all the fucking memes about dumb shit that doesn't matter? And so that's kind of what I want to do. They're home. Oh my goodness. Well, they're gonna have to wait a little bit. Well, we are at 50 minutes, so I feel like we had a good conversation.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's a good start.
Yeah. To more?
But you didn't even say it.
What?
Fuck you, Dad.
Well, fuck you, Dad.
Fuck you, son.
All right. Thank you guys for listening in and watching today. I see we have a couple people joined in on there. Just a reminder, we're going to be doing a sticker giveaway on Facebook. So share this video, the YouTube video, the podcast, anything, but tag us in it. And we will put you we'll actually write you down, put you in a hat, and next week on the pod, I'll pull one of y'all out and we will pick a winner to get a free sticker. So make sure you're tuned in next week for that. Another thing is make sure you go like, subscribe, share the page. You can also support the podcast on anchor.fm/Skulls and Knives podcast. There's a couple options for you. There's a $1 option where you will get access to our exclusive Facebook group, which we are slowly trying to grow into something a lot of fun. I'm trying to post more funny stuff, but it's basically a free-for-all Facebook group where we can just talk openly about anything we want to. And there's going to be no judgment, lots of arguments, and nobody cares. Then option 2 is about, I think it's $4.99, $5 a month will get you a sticker and access to the group. And if you do $10 a month, it will get you access to the group, a sticker, and a Skulls and Knives t-shirt. Anyways, thanks a lot. Deuces. How do I end the video?